Okay, let's see. People joining.
That's the world that we live in. Let me help you believe in what we can do when we stand united. We are one with the world. We can make a brighter tomorrow. Together make a change. It's our life. We can't step back from what we know is right. So let's shine our light. Oh, let's shine our light. We won't listen to what they're saying. We know it's just love that we're giving to this place that we call our home. We can't change what's been done, but it's still our run. We are one with the world.
Catalyzing Change Week 2024 is building the social innovation sector from the 6th to the 10th of May. Players of the social innovation sector, from knowledgeable academics paving new paths to government champions igniting policy shifts, have curated over 100 action-oriented sessions hosted from more than 30 countries in a mix of up to 6 languages. The outcomes of these sessions is intended to drive the development of a highly impactful sector. The goal of CCW 2024 is to tackle the challenges of the sector and embrace solutions that will bridge the gaps in policy, behaviors, and mindsets through innovation and collaborative action. Let's create lasting change together. Register for CCW now and check out our events calendar at catalyzingchangeweek.catalyst2030.net.
Great. Well, thank you, everybody, and welcome. I think what we may do now is, Evelyn, I will ask you to share screen. And welcome to our session on sustainability and social innovation. My name is David Kirsch. I'm a faculty member here at the Robert H. Smith School of Business at the University of Maryland in College Park in the United States. I'm joined with my colleague, Dean Joe Bailey, who's also a faculty member, and the Dean of our undergraduate program. So Professor Bailey, do you want to maybe give a brief welcome to everyone joining the University of Maryland from around the world?
Absolutely. So welcome, and it's delightful to have you all visit us kind of virtually at the University of Maryland. I had the great fortune of not only working with Professor Kirsch this semester, but quite a number of talented students here at the University of Maryland who've done some amazing work looking at making a big societal impact and sustainability through their work and experiential learning. As you may know, the University of Maryland believes strongly that one of the ways in which students can learn is to get outside the walls of the university and engage with our external partners. And so we hope to highlight some of the engagements that we've had this semester under the guidance of Professor Kirsch and with a little bit of help from me. So again, welcome and thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Joe. And I will say that we're supervising 18 teams of students this year, and I would say probably about 12 or 14 of those could reasonably have been kind of fit into one of the SDG kind of categories and seen their work showcased here today. We ended up just choosing a smaller number so that everybody would, I think if we were to try and do 18 presentations in 60 minutes, it would not be a very productive experience for everybody. And so what we've got here are just a handful of our partners, and we want to just give everyone the experience of it. Evelyn, if we could have the next slide. Oops. Yeah, so just again, quickly, some housekeeping. If you're able, please keep your video on, introduce yourself in the chat as needed. And if you have any questions, obviously, let us know. And maybe if we go on to the next slide, we'll get started. So again, if we think about where we fit in the SDGs, we really are focused on SDG 17. To my mind, the thing that makes it all go, which is partnership, figuring out what are the right partners, how do we help generate new partnerships, and make sure that the partnerships we do generate are sustaining and help everybody involved. So our goal today is to really showcase our partners. We have some fantastic partners we've been working with. We're very proud of them, including at least one of our partners who is also a Catalyst 2030 member, quite recently joined the Peace Foundation. We want to share our students' great work because our students are fantastic. A lot of times they may go a little bit unrecognized, but we want to make sure the work gets recognized. And we also want to build a network of future partners. So I think it's quite likely that Professor Bailey and I will be teaching this course again next year. We'd love to have a bunch of new Catalyst 2030 members as part of our next cohort of partners. So that's really the goal today: showcase the partners, showcase the students, and kind of let you know we're here and open for business. Evelyn, do you want to, yeah, just briefly the agenda? We've already had our welcome and introduction. We're now going to talk about 4 of our clients or partners. We'll start, I believe, Fred Mugarba is online from Western Uganda. He will be representing the Peace Foundation, which is a recent Catalyst 2030 member in Uganda, and he'll talk a little bit about the Peace Foundation. Then we'll talk a little bit about New Forest Ventures, a local startup here in our area. Then we'll hear a little bit about Subehude, which was a project from last year that was based in Tanzania. And then we'll wrap up with a conversation with Shelley Helgeson from Connective Impact. Connective Impact is one of our partners. The students from Connective Impact couldn't join us today, but Connective Impact is doing such interesting and important work for this sector that I really wanted to invite Shelley to come and talk about it a little bit. And for each presentation, I'm going to be pretty draconian about time and make sure that we have some time for Q&A from the network. So please get your questions ready. You can put them in the chat or just feel free to unmute when the time comes and let us know what you think. So with that, I'm hoping the Peace Foundation team is ready, and I'm going to turn it over, I think, initially to Fred, who is in Western Uganda and is going to talk to us a little bit about the Peace Foundation. Fred, are you there?
Hi, David. Fred's having trouble connecting right now, so I'm just trying to
Oh, he is.
get him back
Okay.
up. I'm gonna shoot him a call really quick.
All right. I see he's trying. I see Fred is joining. So why don't we give him just a second and hopefully he can join. This is a problem, obviously, one of the persistent issues dealing with doing work in remote corners of the world is internet access that we may take very much for granted here in the University of Maryland, where we have internet too and all these fancy things. It's a little harder to come by. So if I've noticed Fred keeps trying to join, but it doesn't seem to connect. So maybe should the Peace Foundation team, do you want to just talk a little bit about what you've done, and you can introduce the Peace Foundation, and then hopefully Fred does join and can share his words in a little bit. So go ahead, Peace Foundation student team, do you guys want to take it away?
Yes. Hi, my name is Madeline. I am one of the people who worked in the group with supporting the Peace Foundation. Um, my name is Madeline. We're also working with Vincent, Emily, and do you want to introduce yourself? Because you just spoke.
Yes, my name is Azaria.
Okay. So, and we worked with the Peace Foundation. Um, and so this is what we have about them. So the overview on the Peace Foundation, it is a community-based nonprofit humanitarian and development organization that is responding to the effects of climate change. They're responding to these effects through permaculture, education, and facilitating community actions for sustainability. From thinking to new perspectives to address issues of unprecedented conditions like floods, landslides, droughts, soil erosion, crop failure, pollution, to food insecurity, hunger, and malnutrition, the Peace Foundation really covers it all. They make sure to ensure inclusion and social participation, leaving no one behind. Through their innovation schemes, um, they are transforming households and communities to a better life and sustainability. Oh. So, that covered up the words that we were going to talk about, but so they do, as you can see from this video, this is their water pump that they use to, again, in the other picture, as you can see, they take that water that they bring in from the pump and use it to spray the other crops. And so that help with they have really heavy rain seasons and then long seasons where they have nothing. So that helps to offset the balance of everything.
Yes, and for the next slide, we're looking at the theory of change. So we wanted to kind of set 3 goals for the Peace Foundation, at least for our time this semester. So we had a short term, a medium term, and a long term goal. So in the short term, we wanted to raise money and meet the financial needs of the Peace Foundation. They had a lot of issues with the rainy season coming up, so they needed short term money, especially for those water pumps and excavation of that area. And in the medium term, we wanted to build a sustainable relationship with them and with the University of Maryland and build more strategic partnerships for them, so they have more help going forward. And in the long term, the overall goal of the Peace Foundation is to help that specific community affected by them. And we want to help them combat climate change and increase the resilience of their ecosystems.
So, what have we done for Fred so far? First, we recognized the urgent need to raise funds for Fred, which is why we created a GoFundMe for the Peace Foundation. We successfully raised $300, which is equivalent to over 1 million Ugandan shillings. And in the next slide, Fred will talk more about what he used the funds for, if he is able to join the meeting. We also started an Instagram page, and we're leveraging Instagram to raise awareness for the organization by consistently uploading and engaging content to educate and inspire followers. And by reaching a wider audience, we're fostering a culture of environmental consciousness and action. We have also raised awareness throughout the University of Maryland community by engaging with UMD clubs and organizations to amplify Peace Foundation's impact and to expand our reach. We're establishing connections with professors at UMD who share our vision by collaborating with research projects and advocacy campaigns, by leveraging the expertise of faculty members. And through collective efforts, we're maximizing our ability to affect change and promote sustainability. Okay, since Fred is not in the meeting, I'll talk about what he did with the funds. So as you can see in the picture, most of the funds are used towards agriculture, so the crops, the water pumps, as well as education and sports for children.
Alright, so now we'll be talking about what we see in the future. We want to create a long-lasting relationship with individuals and organizations on campus to continue Fred's plan with the Peace Foundation. We have resources within different clubs and organizations on campus that will benefit his work in the long run. We made contact with Dr. Melissa Welsh, the Director of Agricultural Science and Technology at the University of Maryland. We discussed to her what the Peace Foundation is and what Fred plans to do with his organization, and she's happy to help out in any way she can. We want to create this relationship in order for Fred to learn more about agriculture so that it goes to good use for him in Uganda. We want to make it aware on campus of this cause so that maybe we can set up internship opportunities or potential classes where you can go to Uganda and help the Peace Foundation with their work for credits. These resources we have on campus will not only benefit the Peace Foundation, but it will be a great opportunity to get some hands-on experience with nonprofit organizations and creating an organization out of little to nothing.
Okay, so thank you. Are there any kind of questions? I'm sorry we were not able to get the Peace Foundation folks into the meeting. One of the issues that the students have certainly had to confront is the time difference and connecting with our partners. But are there any questions from everybody about Peace Foundation, about what the students are doing, and what we're trying to do next? Please feel free. I see lots of messages, but I'm not sure if I'm getting all of them. Okay, well, I'm not seeing any hands raised. I will just say this has been a very challenging assignment for the students, and I think one of the things that's been very both edifying, but also I think a little frustrating is seeing how hard it is to get just to build this partnership, to make these connections has been very hard. The team, Vincent, Azar, Emily, Madeline, have had to, get on the phone at midnight or 1 o'clock in the morning, or, the fact that we're having trouble getting the Peace Foundation into the meeting here gives us some example of this challenge. My hope is that once we have a little more of a richer partnership between Peace Foundation and the university, that it's less of just me and a couple students kind of fishing around, and actually we can start really enriching the flow of information and resources back and forth, and I think that certainly is our goal. And stay tuned, come back next year, and we'll see how far we've made it. So,
and if I may, Professor Kirsch, one of the things I think you'll see with this team, but I think the other teams, is when you have those relationships that span multiple semesters, is it's much easier to align expectations of a partner like the Peace Foundation and the student teams, and of course, being able to pick up where the previous team let off, and scoping a reasonable project. I think one of the things that I really appreciate the students did was, take action as opposed to just being a set of recommendations. And so I was curious if the students just wanted to maybe comment on how more meaningful that experience was when they were able to go ahead and make an impact during the course of the project, as opposed to just letting another team kind of take care of it.
Anyone want to respond to that? I know that was something that you all felt very acutely as you were getting started. What was it like?
Yeah, so it was actually really beneficial because Dr. Welsh was a professor that I had last semester, and I really got to see like firsthand um how much she cares about like agriculture and stuff like that. So I think that was like really beneficial and helped us to really take the steps rather than just being like, this is what the next group should do. And because I knew she would be eager about helping.
Good. Well, and I think, you dealt with the kind of crisis of the moment in some very constructive ways. And then, we are very happy to be able to help help a few people, but also the prospect of this longer term impact is what's really even more gratifying. So, all right, why don't we switch over then to the second group? This is New Forest Ventures. Oh, I'm sorry, Fred, are you there? I don't hear him. Let's see. I don't know, maybe he's muted, or maybe the connection is not good. Fred, I think we may have to, I think we'll probably just have to move on. If we get the connection for solid, we can bring you back towards the end. But why don't we switch to our second group, which is New Forest Ventures, a startup based nearby us here in Virginia. And we're joined by the founder of New Forest Ventures, David Miller. And David will talk for a couple minutes about his vision for New Forest Ventures, and then we'll have the team of students. We actually have two student teams working with New Forest Ventures. We'll talk a little bit about what they've been doing. David, go ahead.
Great. Can everybody hear me? Good.
Yes,
Excellent. So I first want to thank everybody for creating CCW 2024, 2030, inviting us. I appreciate it. It was great to work with the Maryland teams organizing this. I have to give them credit because, as we just heard, I feel really connected to the Peace Foundation because we're working, even though it's a totally different market, we're working in similar spaces, trying to do similar things. So that's very exciting. And like Fred over there, the students had to jump in as this thing was going on because it's agriculture and we were in planting season. So as a small startup, there were the initiatives they were working on, and then the reality of having to get plants in the ground at a certain time of the year, get the right products. So it's been very chaotic, stressful startup situation. But this idea came to me about a year and a half ago when I was working with a sustainability accelerator in the DMV. And Evie, you can move on to the next slide. And when I got involved with them, I realized how overwhelming some of the sustainability challenges were. And it didn't matter what you were talking about: pollution, floods, fire, all different things, deforestation. Next slide, please. And in some ways, the solutions are just as confusing. And this is here in Northern Virginia, DMV, Maryland area. People have all these different choices. Do I want to protest? Do I want to buy Chipotle? Do I want to buy an electric car? It's just as confusing as the problems, but it turns out there's a really simple solution if we go to the next slide. And I learned about it by Googling. By planting native trees and plants, you can actually solve some of our most pressing problems, from habitat loss, carbon capture, clean water, clean air, and it's a very local thing. In addition, there's a method of forest planting called the Miyawaki method, which some of you may have heard of. It came out of Japan about 30 or 40 years ago. It's slowly spreading globally. We know how long it takes ideas to spread, but we figured we could do this. We could plant high growth forest. What a Miyawaki forest does, it grows 100-year forest in 30 years. So everything's accelerated by planting the correct plants in the right place. Next slide. So as we realized we could do this, I called up one of my former students. I used to teach at George Mason University, who had a landscaping business, and I'd grown flowers with him in the past. I said, we're going to grow one of these tiny forests, which was written up in the New York Times a few months later, not ours, but just the idea. Turns out we weren't the only ones that want to grow trees. There actually were policies in place for planting trees. That's one in Maryland where UMD is. That's actually where I live. They realized this problem. And then even this famous author at University of Delaware, Doug Ptolemy, he kind of came into the situation and said, listen, this is all true. We need native plants, but they need to be on private lands because in the United States, 80% of the land is controlled by private owners. So with all these different trends going on, government involvement, private sector, new innovation in planting, we had to come up with a business model. Next slide.
Yeah.
And we were wondering who would care about this. And in truth, we already knew civic organization governments were involved. Turns out a lot of real estate owners and developers might be interested because what we learned was planting native trees and forests is actually cheaper to manage. You don't have to water as much. You don't have to fertilize, which means you don't have as much pollution. You don't have to cut and maintain, which means you don't have emissions. So we thought for forward-thinking real estate actors, corporates and businesses who are very focused on their sustainability plans, their ESG, and then finally, local impact partners who care about the local environment and can see the connection. By the way, just 2 weeks ago, next slide, by the way, I find myself clicking the screen, Evie, thank you. And what we learned about 2 weeks ago is that in the DMV, the DC area where University of Maryland is, where Virginia is, we are losing canopy every year. The new report just came out 2 weeks ago. So every acre matters. So what we did was we went to my former student who had a small farm, the only 9 acres left of a 240-acre dairy farm. And we started transforming that by planting a year ago, our first native forest. You can see it there on Google Maps. So that's our first business model. The second one, if we flip slides, was to a membership model for organizations that don't have land but want to work with us. They can actually support the planting. They get social media content, they get website content. In some ways, it's allowing them a simple activity to make an impact directly. So actually last month, which was Earth Month, we had 2 local businesses sign on because they want to know what they can do to help locally. They don't have land that they control. They are not focused on sustainability. One is an auto shop, one is a PR firm, consulting firm, but they know they have to do something. So they've chose this business model. That's our second model. And then the third model is really the big one. Next slide, Evie, which is really, can we transform land? Can we actually start going acre by acre, designing, installing, servicing and managing, and then measuring and reporting carbon capture, habitat renewal, the species that come back, whether they're birds or bugs or those things. So that's the bigger model. Those are more challenging. Those are a slower timeline to sell. And I think some of the teams will talk about that. So the next slide that we might have, I think, will get us near the end. So this is one example of how those 3 potential business models might play out. Because as I talked about earlier, this is not even a year-old business. We are trying to build it as we fly it, if you will. And one of the teams, which we'll hear from in a minute, which was focused on the civic and governmental side, they kept pushing me and showing me things and pushed me out to a meeting where I learned about rainscape rebates, where if you plant native plants, you can actually get cash back from the government. So currently on this project, I'm working with 2 home builders to start putting rainscapes in their new projects, which will initially actually lower the cost of installation, but over the long run will also lower the cost of maintenance, and most importantly, protect our local waterways from stormwater runoff. Will create more habitat, will capture carbon, clean the air. And so really it's a win-win. And that's the one we're pushing really hard the next couple of weeks, because we can still plant a few things this spring and into the summer. And that may be our last slide. I don't know, Eva, if I have anything else in here, but I think that's mostly where we are. So hopefully I kept to the time limit. Hopefully I didn't overwhelm, but I appreciate the time. And again, most importantly, the opportunity to work with these students. Thank you.
So now maybe we'll hear from the, I think we had actually 2 student teams who were working with New Forest Ventures. Only one of those teams actually, everyone else had stuff to do, it's a busy campus. But we do have one of the teams here to share their findings. So I think that's what we call the New Force Ventures Policy Team. And we'll turn it over to you. When you're talking, if possible, please turn your video on so that we can see you. Chloe, is that your hand raised?
Sorry, I just was making sure they got me. But I am Chloe. I'm here with Feroz, Molly, and Jocelyn. And so throughout this semester, we've kind of been working on a comprehensive grant spreadsheet. We've also been working on kind of analyzing this spreadsheet and making a one-page summary of all the grants that we then compiled. And then we kind of worked on some landscape flyers, which you will see later on. You go to the next slide. And then so kind of our timeline of what we've been doing this semester is in February, we began our research and we integrated data into our grant spreadsheet. In March, then we completed our grant spreadsheet. And then we also began our analysis with this grant spreadsheet that you'll also see in our next slide. And the way in which we analyzed this was by kind of seeing which ones NFC was eligible for, which ones share NFC's goals and kind of by state. And then we also completed our analysis in April and May. We created our one-page summary and we began our research on the Rainscape grants.
Yes, but we have calls.
And then, so as you can see here, this is kind of our spreadsheet that we have and that we've kind of been working with. At the end, I think we had about like 36 grants put together. And as you can see, we separated them by the name of the grant, where they are, the sponsor, who's eligible, basic description, and we couldn't add all of it, obviously, but there was a ton more that we were also kind of separating them by. And then from there, that was again where we decided to kind of narrow them down a little bit more to make sure that we can help out David the best that we can.
So currently, Dr. Miller is focused on partnering with small businesses, so he wouldn't apply to grants that are strictly for public land. He would apply for grants that are for private land. These 3 grants are in Maryland. The first 2 are related to trees, while the last one is about rainscapes. The grants range from $1,000 to $20,000.
Okay, now moving into more analysis of the grant spreadsheet. So after analyzing the grants, we found that private landowners were eligible for about 50% of the grants. Nonprofits, faith-based organizations, and or homeowners associations qualified for about 30% of the grants. And then the rest was just other organizations. So next slide. We also found that the main focus of the grants changed. So we had increasing canopy coverage was about 30% of the grants, improving water quality was about 24%, improving air quality was 9%, turning green was 12%, and then the remaining 25% was other. Next slide. Okay, so after Dr. Miller decided to move into the Rainscapes zone, I created 2 flyers, so one for Montgomery County and one for Prince George's County, both in Maryland. I focused on the business and environmental benefits, such as reducing stormwater and pollution runoff or reducing property flooding. I highlighted the rebates because they was up to $20,000. I listed the types of projects, so they could do rain gardens, they could do conservation landscape or urban tree canopies. And I also included some of David's contact information, so anyone who saw the flyer could get in contact with him. Next slide.
Yeah, so for our outcomes of what we did, we brought potential customers to David, and now he has a better outlook on what is available to his business. I think that grant spreadsheet will be invaluable to him in the coming year. And he also has Rainscape flyers for the 2 most populated counties in Maryland, Montgomery and Prince George's. They're right outside DC. Each has about 1 million people, so there's a lot of opportunities around there. Next slide, please. And then, so our recommendations for him are to contact the Chesapeake Bay Trust and other entities that have multiple grants associated with them. A lot in Maryland, a lot of the grants are run by the Chesapeake Bay Trust because the Chesapeake Bay watershed is trying to be restored, trying to negate pollution effects in the area. So, and there's a lot of counties in Maryland that are that surround the Chesapeake Bay. So they want to revitalize those areas. And our recommendation is for him to continue to focus on small businesses in these areas, as they are probably the most likely to be receptive to these ideas. And then also to use the work that we did on the grant research and put it on his website. This way, businesses who want to partner with him have the information right on his website. Thank you.
Okay, so thanks for the update, the introduction to New Forest Ventures, and then also the overview of the work that the team has been doing. I hope that this will get the ball rolling in a number of ways, and we're looking forward to hearing from David in the fall, or perhaps next cycle. We'll have a new cohort ready to go. Are there any questions or from the broader Catalyst network about this project or any aspect of it? And I'm having a little trouble monitoring the chat, so please, if there are so someone is asking, are the grants also provided to Africa? So this is a very interesting question, and I think these grants have been very much focused on the local area, but obviously we could, if there's a group that is seeking to identify potential grant-making organizations in anywhere, that would be certainly a very appropriate project. And in fact, maybe.
And I would just add, if it's okay, yes, I'm sure there are grants globally on this. Planting trees, there's a global movement. I don't remember the exact number, if it's 5 trillion trees. So I'm guessing if the questioner looks around, they will find grants in their local areas.
But it may be actually that the students, one of your deliverables might be, hey, here's the search process that you should follow. Here's the kind of how you build a grant database like the one that you've delivered to New Forest Ventures. And then that would be a starting point for a whole host of organizations that may not be able to either work with us or have the time to kind of start from scratch. So maybe that would be a recommendation I could give back to the team, is help us figure out how we can provide this type of kind of cookbook to some other groups. And I see Shelley asks, what was the most helpful resource for the student team to identify the grants? Students, you want to weigh in on that?
Yeah, so I think our process with this was really, because we know the area pretty well. We've been living here for a while. So our process was to just look up different counties in Maryland, and then you put tree planting grant afterwards and you see what pops up. The same thing works for Virginia, because in Maryland and Virginia, a lot of the government or a lot of the government control is on the county level. So we were just able to kind of check off all the counties in Maryland with that. And then also there are a couple of cities in Maryland, like the bigger cities in Maryland, also have their own tree planting grants. So it was really just a lot of kind of blind Googling for different areas, but there seemed to be a lot of options.
Great. And I see that there are a couple links in the chat as well. So hopefully that helps us. Everybody kind of can move forward a little bit and start a little bit down the road that the team has already traveled. I'm going to switch gears now to our next presenter. I believe, Evelyn, are you going to talk about Subehude? And I think if you just leave yourself muted, you'll be heard here. So, and this is actually a project from last semester that Evelyn worked on. Subahude is also a Catalyst 2030 member, and we Evelyn will say a little bit more about our work with Subahude.
Yeah, so can you guys hear me okay? I don't know where the mic is in this room.
Can everyone hear? Yep, I see some thumbs up. Go for it.
So Subahude was an organization that I consulted for last year for the same class. Subahude stands for Sustainable Beekeeping for Human Development. So as a background, Subahude is a Tanzanian nonprofit. So we tackled some of the same issues that the earlier organization Peace Foundation had with communication, with a 8-hour time difference, and spotty internet connection. Their focus is on using sustainable beekeeping to help with regenerative farming and building up the economic status of their local area in Tabora, Tanzania. Their other pursuits were promoting access to quality education, improving water, sanitation, hygiene in rural and urban settlements, and training various individuals in their region, specifically women and young children, on resource management and efforts to mitigate climate change. So our project was to expand their fundraising efforts, specifically in the US and Europe, to help build more funding, and then they would be able to build an educational center for sustainable beekeeping and regenerative farming. And then they would be able to teach people in their local area about all of these things and then build their economy. So as a team in the US, our first primary deliverable was the fundraising manual. We did a lot of research into the best ways for an organization in Tanzania to fundraise in the US and Europe. The manual ended up being about 10 pages of information that outlined various methods of fundraising, and then also pursuing grants and other things like that. And then we also helped them with social media outreach to focus that on how to use social media to gain funds for their projects. And then we also reached out to other organizations that could potentially donate money to them or other resources that they may need. So the fundraising manual included information about building up their website. At the start of the semester, they didn't have a website up and running. So that was a really cool thing by the end of the semester that they had. We also built up their social media, talked to various influencers and people in the space on social media so that they could build up those connections for when they were ready for the fundraising to begin. We reached out to around 40 different organizations to potentially partner with, and then we wrote information about how they could receive grants for their organization. And these are some of the posts that we made on their social media. We wanted to have a lot of posts using pictures of the things that they're actually doing in Tanzania, but there was some trouble getting pictures sent to us during the semester, so we kind of focused on just general pictures. And since the semester has ended, they have posted more about the actual work that they've been doing. And then when we were reaching out to various organizations, our first step was to find a bunch of organizations that were related to beekeeping, sustainable agriculture, and things like that all around the world. We created a list of over 80 organizations that they could potentially reach out to. We wrote a template email for how they could talk to them. We found that it was most beneficial if the email was rather short and straight to the point, so that they could then give more information in following emails. We collected some responses from our outreach. And then we were able to make adjustments based off of those responses. As for our final recommendations, we built onto the website a donation button, consistent access to their content on social media, and reaching out to influencers. We made a posting schedule for them for social media, recommended that they use merchandise for their donations, and we collaborated with you.
Great. Okay, thank you. So this, I just put in the chat, this fundraising manual that Evelyn and her team prepared is something we would be happy to share with other organizations in the network. You can email me or Evelyn and we can provide that. I think what I want to do now, just while we have a couple more minutes, is just see if Fred Bulgarba is able to join us. Fred, are you there? Can you unmute? I saw Fred on the screen. Let's see, we may have lost him. Oh, that's too bad. Okay, well, what I'll do is move on to introduce our final guest, and that's Shelley Helgeson from Connective Impact. Hi, Shelley. Thank you for joining us again on relatively short notice. But
my pleasure.
Connective Impact is one of the partners with our second course, the course that Professor Bailey and I have been supervising. And we've had a student team working with Connective Impact to improve sort of reporting and the dashboard and sort of how Connective Impact is able to monitor its engagement. But I think it would probably be great, Shelley, if you would just tell us a little bit about what Connective Impact does, because Connective Impact provides exactly the type of connection that so many of these organizations that we're hearing from today need.
Sure. Well, thank you for having me. It's nice to be here, and it's been great to listen to all the projects that the students have been working on. As David mentioned, I'm Shelley Helgeson. I'm our Chief Strategy Officer at Connective Impact, and we're an organization that essentially provides the donor intelligence, resources, and relationships or connections to funders that organizations need to resource their projects and sustain their projects. And so I think we're hearing a familiar theme across all these projects that often nonprofit organizations are really the experts in the programmatic work and in the impact that they're seeking to have in their communities or in the world. But it's really the finding those that want to fund and resource their projects is really the difficult part. And so many of our partners, and I'll speak to about our partners in a moment, are exactly that. They're the experts in health or environment or refugee relocation, but are not the experts in fundraising. And so Connective Impact is a small team. We're all professional fundraisers and communication experts that have worked for many years, many of us decades, in different areas of social impact. And so we're a membership network, so we're almost 260 members right now of doers, we call doers, or NGOs and social enterprises, funders and businesses who are all aligned in seeking to have impact. Specifically, we focus on the global South. So unfortunately, not in organizations, many organizations who are located in the US, but not doing work in the US, mostly seeking impact in low and middle income countries around the world. And again, what we really do is help to align our members with funders who have the same goals, who are trying to seek the same impact in different areas, And we identify those donors and then make the connections, the introductions for them. And as again, fundraisers, we've learned that's the hardest part often, is just getting that introduction or that connection to the funder. And what we do, kind of our ethos, is really around creating relationships, fundraising via relationships, that it's more than a transaction. That's really about, like I said, finding that alignment and connecting human to human, where you can align on the goals and align on the impact that you're seeking to have in the world, and really move that work forward as a relationship, as a partnership, and that will lead to the most long-term sustainable funding for your project. So it's a very brief overview. Happy to dive in where you might have more questions.
Sure. Well, I know one of the things, maybe we don't have our student presentation for Connective Impact here. I did put your the website in the chat.
Sure.
And people should feel free to learn more about it. But I think one of the questions that arises both, from working with the students who've been working with you and looking at these other presentations is sort of how do you recommend that these nascent organizations sort of balance the sort of GoFundMe, bottom up, very, small donor, individual, social media connection engaged strategy with the, a larger sort of grant-based focus in terms of, and do you have thoughts about how people should sequence these kinds of programs, or how to think about those?
Yeah, well, I think just, when it comes to fundraising or funding your project, I think, you're best suited to try to have the most diverse kind of portfolios of funders. Your financial advisor might advise the same in investing, but you don't always rely on one source, because that can dry up quickly, or strategies change. Funders always have different priorities that can change on a dime based on the source of the money or the board who's making the decisions. So certainly, if you have the ability, you should always have a kind of a diverse, or strive for as diverse a source of income as you possibly can. And so I think, often nonprofits get off the ground because they find one or two individuals who really wants to provide that seed funding, who you've met it, through your work, or who maybe it's a former employer or a family member, but really making that leap then, I think, to finding institutional or sort of these more established foundations, who, what we've learned in our work is they're really well networked. And so once you get your first grant, or, one or two first grants from a established foundation, typically they will be your best advocates to help you find other funders. So, donors like to share ideas and talk to each other, and brag about the great work that they're funding. So typically, I would say, of course, your original funders, who often are these individuals, are going to be hopefully with you for a long time, but also going for government funding or foundation institutionalized funding will help just unlock new opportunities as well. So of course, and then, I think GoFundMes are really great for specific projects, or if you have a funding gap. So there's something that you can really mobilize the public around. But again, I know that having kind of unrestricted, flexible funding is really going to help organizations be able to do what they need in order to kind of grow their impact. And so that's how I would also think about sort of these individual campaigns and going after kind of long-term unrestricted funding as well. So I think that latter piece is what can be much more catalytic for the organization.
Great. Yeah, so I see a question, and now is a good time. I think we have just 5 minutes. So if there are any kind of general questions about anything you've seen or questions about, I think we had one last
just
slide from our end, Evelyn, about sort of how to get in touch with us here at the Smith School. And then I see Nima asks, how do you measure impact? So Shelley, do you want to?
Yeah. Absolutely. And it kind of ties in well with the student project as well. So we measure our impact by the connections made so the connections we make for our members, our nonprofit organizations with funders. So again, we rely on the nonprofit organization to really be the expert in the work that they do. So we're, again, just connecting them so that they're the ones that can speak best to the work they do with the funder. So it's really the connections made is where we measure our success. But one thing that our student team is helping us do is really identify how those connections, when they turn into funding and where around the world they are having those organizations and those funding partnerships are having or having impacts. So they're helping us kind of create this nice visual model where we can see kind of heat maps of where impact is happening. That's over the long term. So the short-term successes, we've introduced Peace Foundation to Rockefeller Philanthropy. That's an example. But that's our first short-term success, is that connection made. And then we like to follow it to see, okay, now did that lead to a funding opportunity? And that's what the team's helping us visualize.
Yeah. Well, we've seen the draft of it. It looks good. I know it hasn't gone through QA yet with your group, but it's looking good.
We're excited. We're excited to see it.
Great. So we just have a couple more minutes. I see Fred is back in the Fred, can you unmute and hear us, or can we hear you?
Yeah, I can hear you. We are now on. Well,
got it. Well, we're just wrapping up. I hope you've been able to hear some of the content. I do hope you and Shelley will be connected. We'll make a point of that. I think the work you're doing you'd be a great candidate partner for Connective Impact, and we'll make that happen offline for sure. Everyone's seeing, this is our little wrap-up slide. So this is, I'm the academic director of something called the Center for Social Value Creation here at Smith. And you should absolutely reach, anyone on the call or seeing this afterwards in the recorded version should feel free to reach out to me or to Dean Bailey to be a partner in one of our future projects. We're very excited about how we see this, our role in catalyzing change, and as we are here on the first day of Catalyzing Change Week, or Catalyst 2030. So I think we're right at the hour. So Karen, is there anything else we need to do to close things up?
Yes, I would like to share with you some information on CCW. First of all, thanks all for joining this session. We would like you to fill out this feedback form that we're sharing in the chat. And also we want to let you know about the upcoming Catalyst 2030 awards. It's going to be at the end of the year, but nominations are earlier. So if you want to nominate any organization or double check about your possibility of being also part of it, please make sure you do. Also, if you haven't joined Catalyst, we encourage you to join the movement, and we'll have a session on what's Catalyst about on Friday 10 at 2 p.m. CEST. So please join. That's around 7 a.m. on EDT. So and finally, please share in the chat your thoughts about this session, and we hopefully will see each other in an upcoming session. Thanks all. back to you, David. You're muted.
Okay, thank you, Karen, and thanks to everybody for joining us today. And we turn you over to your next Catalyzing Change Week session. It's a wonderful program. Stay tuned.
Thanks. Thanks for the prompt. See you.
Bye.